The massive space station gleamed against the endless darkness, its metallic surface reflecting countless pinpricks of distant starlight. Yoonji Park stood perfectly still, her 12-year-old frame barely reaching the observation window. She had dreamed of this moment her entire life, being the first Korean child selected for the Interstellar Cultural Exchange program. Her parents had spent months preparing her. Countless language lessons, cultural adaptation training, and psychological evaluations had led to this moment. Yoonji was special, not just intelligent, but remarkably adaptable. Her ability to read situations and adjust her behavior made her the perfect candidate for first contact. The alien representatives moved around her. They were tall, almost translucent beings with elongated limbs and eyes that seemed to change color with every movement. Their language was complex, a mixture of telepathic signals and subtle body movements that most humans would never understand. But Yoonji was different. Her first days on the station were carefully monitored. Every interaction, every response was recorded. The Galactic Council members watched her with a mixture of curiosity and clinical detachment. To them, she was less a child and more an interesting specimen. On the third day, the tests began. They seemed innocent at first, simple cognitive challenges that looked like games. Yoonji solved them quickly, her mind working faster than the complex algorithmic systems designed to challenge her. The aliens exchanged glances. Something was different about this human child. As days turned into weeks, the tests became more intricate. Psychological probes that would have broken most children became mere puzzles to Yoonji. She maintained her composure, her dark eyes always watching, always learning. The aliens didn't realize they were teaching her more than they were testing her. Her small communication device, seemingly a simple translator, contained advanced quantum recording technology. Every moment, every interaction was being documented. Microscopic circuits captured not just sound and image, but emotional frequencies and psychological responses. The station was a world of its own. Corridors that shifted like living organisms, rooms that changed temperature and gravity with a mere thought. Yoonji explored with a calm that surprised even the most experienced alien researchers. Where other children would show fear, she showed curiosity. But beneath the surface, something was changing. The tests were becoming more invasive. Psychological boundaries were slowly being pushed. The Galactic Council believed they were studying a simple human child. They didn't understand they were awakening something far more complex. Yoonji's room was more of a laboratory than a living space. Soft white walls that seemed to breathe, monitoring devices that tracked her every biological response. She knew she was being watched. More importantly, she was watching them back. The aliens made a critical mistake. They believed human children were fragile. They thought emotional manipulation would break her spirit. They were collecting data, preparing reports, believing they were conducting a neutral scientific study. What they didn't know was that Yoonji was collecting her own data. Every subtle movement, every complex interaction was being processed by a mind far more advanced than they understood. She was learning their weaknesses, understanding their communication patterns, mapping their psychological structures. Her small frame belied a resilience that would become legendary. Each test, each probe, each attempt to break her psychological barriers only made her stronger. The quantum recorders in her communication device were capturing everything, not just for Earth, but as a potential blueprint for future resistance. The station hummed with technological complexity. Alien researchers moved with calculated precision, believing they were in complete control. They didn't see the storm brewing in the eyes of a 12-year-old girl who was rapidly becoming something more than their experiment. Yoonji Park stood by the observation window, watching the endless darkness of space. To the aliens, she was a subject. To Earth, she was a hope. And to herself, she was becoming something entirely unexpected. The communication room at Earth's diplomatic center buzzed with tension. Hyunwoo Kim stared at the fragmented transmission logs, his fingers trembling slightly as he decoded the encrypted messages from the Galactic Council's research station. Something was wrong with Yoonji's transmissions. The recordings weren't just data. They were becoming increasingly distorted, filled with strange psychological markers that suggested something far more sinister was happening. The alien researchers had moved beyond simple cognitive tests. Their experiments now involved complex psychological manipulation techniques designed to push human psychological boundaries. They believed human children could be studied like laboratory specimens, their emotional responses mapped and analyzed without consequence. Each day, the tests became more intrusive. Yoonji was subjected to environments that continuously shifted. Rooms where gravity changed unpredictably, spaces where temperature fluctuated between freezing and boiling in minutes. The goal was to test her adaptability, but they were doing more than measuring her responses. Her communication implant captured everything. Quantum recording technology embedded deep within the device collected not just audio and visual data, but emotional frequencies and neurological responses. What the aliens didn't understand was that every moment of their experiment was being documented in microscopic detail. Hyunwoo realized the recordings were a carefully constructed map of psychological torture. The Galactic Council wasn't conducting research. They were systematically breaking down a child's mental defenses. Each test was designed to create micro-traumas, subtle psychological wounds that would accumulate over time. In the station's sterile white rooms, Yoonji faced challenges that would have destroyed most adults. Telepathic probes that attempted to tear apart her mental barriers, sensory deprivation experiments that lasted for hours, psychological tests that pushed the boundaries of human endurance. The aliens believed they were collecting scientific data. They didn't realize they were creating a weapon more dangerous than any physical technology. Back on Earth, communication channels were deliberately being blocked. Diplomatic messages were delayed, translated incorrectly, filtered through complex, bureaucratic systems designed to prevent direct communication. Someone didn't want the full truth to reach human authorities. Hyunwoo worked tirelessly, using advanced decryption algorithms to piece together the fragmented transmissions. Each decoded message revealed another layer of the horrifying experiment. The Galactic Council viewed human children as nothing more than research subjects, their emotional integrity considered irrelevant. Yoonji's responses were remarkable. Where most children would have broken, she adapted. Her psychological resilience became a form of resistance. She wasn't just surviving the experiments, she was studying her captors, understanding their methodology, mapping their psychological weaknesses. The quantum recorders continued their silent work. Every moment of psychological manipulation was being documented with perfect clarity. The aliens believed they were conducting research. In reality, they were creating a comprehensive record of their own inevitable destruction. Subtle changes began appearing in the transmission logs. Yoonji's responses became more calculated, her psychological defenses transforming from passive resistance to active strategy. She was learning, adapting, preparing. Hyunwoo understood something the Galactic Council didn't. This wasn't just an experiment. This was the beginning of something much larger. Each psychological test, each attempt to break her spirit, was creating a response mechanism that would have long-lasting consequences. The communication room's screens flickered with encrypted data, hidden messages, quantum encrypted files that told a story far more complex than simple scientific research. The Galactic Council was making a catastrophic mistake. They thought they were studying a child. They didn't realize they were awakening, a force that would fundamentally change the balance of interstellar power. Yoonji Park was no longer just a subject. She was becoming a symbol of human resilience, a living testament to the strength that could emerge from systematic psychological attack. The moment the full transmission arrived, Earth changed. Global networks lit up simultaneously, a complex web of communication that spread faster than any virus or information stream ever could. What had been isolated incidents of concern transformed into a unified global response. Ji-eun Lee stood in the central command center, her hands moving across holographic displays that showed real-time global reaction. Military installations, research centers, government facilities, everything was synchronizing with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. The detailed records of Yoonji's torture were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. It wasn't just a report. It was a complete psychological and biological breakdown of systematic alien cruelty. Every microscopic detail of the experiment was captured, documented, with quantum-level precision. Governments that had been rivals moments before now worked together. Economic barriers dissolved. Technological secrets that had been closely guarded were suddenly shared across national boundaries. The attack on a single child had done what decades of diplomacy could not. It had unified humanity completely. Military, research facilities that had been working on separate projects now combined their knowledge. Advanced weapon systems that were once theoretical became practical realities in hours. Technologies that had been kept hidden were rapidly upgraded, modified, and prepared for potential conflict. The global population responded with a mixture of rage and calculated determination. Social media platforms, usually divided by cultural differences, now showed a single message. Billions of humans across different continents, languages, and cultural backgrounds shared one sentiment: complete and total support for retribution. Scientific communities that had been competitive now collaborated. Research centers in Seoul, New York, Moscow, and São Paulo began sharing technological blueprints. Quantum computing networks that had been isolated were now interconnected, creating a global brain of technological potential. Ji-Yun Lee watched as military strategies were developed with unprecedented speed. The psychological profile of the Galactic Council was being analyzed, dissected, and understood at a level that went beyond traditional intelligence gathering. They weren't just preparing for a potential conflict. They were preparing to completely dismantle an entire interstellar political structure. Advanced satellite networks began tracking every Galactic Council communication channel. Quantum encryption technologies were developed and deployed within hours. What would have taken years now happened in a matter of moments. The psychological impact was equally significant. Humanity had always been seen as a young, somewhat naive species by other galactic civilizations. That perception was about to change dramatically. The unified response was creating a new narrative. Humans were not just survivors, but a species capable of total, calculated revenge. Military hardware that had been theoretical became practical. Weapon systems that combined biological understanding with advanced quantum technologies were rapidly developed. Spacecraft designs that had been shelved were now being fast-tracked into production. Every research facility, every military installation, every technological center was now working towards a single goal. The torture of one child had transformed into a global mission of response and retribution. The Galactic Council had made a fundamental mistake. They thought they were studying a child. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant. Communication networks showed something unprecedented. Where there would have been panic, there was calm. Where there would have been fear, there was calculated determination. Humanity was not reacting emotionally. They were responding strategically. Ji-Yun Lee understood what was happening. This was more than a military response. This was a complete recalibration of humanity's position in the galactic community. The rules were about to change completely. Quantum communication networks began sending encrypted messages across multiple star systems. The message was clear, even without words. Humanity was no longer going to be a passive participant in galactic politics. The global response was like a perfectly synchronized machine. Military, scientific, economic, and social systems were moving with a precision that suggested they had been preparing for this moment their entire existence. Yoonji Park, the child who had been tortured, was now the catalyst for something much larger. She had become a symbol, a turning point in human history. The Galactic Council's experiment was about to have consequences they could never have anticipated. The first strike came without warning. Precision-guided quantum weapons sliced through the Galactic Council's defense systems like they were made of paper. No alarms, no resistance, just complete, calculated destruction. Yoonji Park stood in the command center, no longer just a victim but the symbolic leader of humanity's response. Her eyes, which had once reflected childhood innocence, now burned with a cold, strategic intensity that terrified even the most hardened military commanders. The attack wasn't random. Each target was selected with surgical precision. Quantum mapping technologies developed in secret revealed every critical infrastructure point of the Galactic Council. Communication networks, energy production centers, military command stations, all were systematically neutralized within hours. Human technology had been underestimated. What the alien civilization thought was primitive was actually a carefully hidden arsenal of quantum-level weaponry. Spacecraft that seemed outdated transformed into advanced killing machines, their technology so complex that alien defense systems couldn't even comprehend the attack patterns. The psychological warfare was equally devastating. Instead of traditional bombardment, humanity used information as a weapon. Quantum communication channels were hijacked, revealing every dark secret of the Galactic Council's experiments. Their own communication networks became instruments of their destruction. Military analysts watching the attack were stunned. This wasn't revenge. This was a complete systematic dismantling of an entire galactic political structure. Each strike was calculated, each movement designed to cause maximum psychological and infrastructural damage. Alien civilizations watched in horror. Humanity, once considered a young and naive species, was revealing a technological and strategic capability that nobody had anticipated. The attacks weren't just military. They were a complete recalibration of interstellar power dynamics. Yunji moved between holographic displays, her small frame belying the strategic mind that was guiding humanity's response. The quantum recorders that had documented her torture now guided precise military strikes. Every moment of psychological manipulation was being transformed into a weapon. The first wave of attacks took less than 6 hours. By the time the Galactic Council realized what was happening, half of their critical infrastructure was already destroyed. Communication channels were jammed, defense systems neutralized, military capabilities completely compromised. Quantum weapons that could deconstruct molecular structures at a subatomic level were deployed. Entire space stations were reduced to atomic dust without a single traditional explosive being used. The technology was so advanced that it seemed almost magical to the alien defenders. Psychological warfare complemented the physical attacks. Humanity broadcast the complete documentation of the experiments conducted on Yunji across every possible communication channel. The entire galaxy was forced to witness the cruelty that had triggered this response. Military strategists had prepared for this moment for decades. Secret research facilities that had been developing technologies beyond current understanding were now fully activated. Weapon systems that combined biological understanding with quantum mechanics were deployed with ruthless efficiency. The Galactic Council's mistake became increasingly clear. They had viewed humanity as a collection of individual nations, unable to unite. Instead, they had created a unified force more dangerous than any single military power. Yunji Park represented more than a victim. She was a symbol of humanity's transformation. The child who had been tortured was now guiding a response that would redefine interstellar relationships forever. Space itself seemed to bend around human weapons. Traditional understanding of physics became irrelevant. The attacks weren't just destroying physical infrastructure, they were fundamentally changing the understanding of technological capability. Communication intercepts revealed the complete shock of the Galactic Council. They had no defensive strategy against an attack so precise, so calculated, that it seemed to come from a level of technological understanding they couldn't comprehend. Every military doctrine, every strategic assumption about human capabilities was being systematically destroyed. What had begun as an experiment on a single child was now a full-scale revolution that would change galactic politics forever. The first phase of retribution was complete, and humanity was just getting started. The final phase of humanity's response was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Where other civilizations would have stopped, humans continued their systematic dismantling of the Galactic Council's entire political and military infrastructure. Yunji Park, now recognized as the strategic architect of humanity's revenge, stood at the center of a massive holographic command center. Her presence alone seemed to generate a field of calculated intensity that made even veteran military commanders feel both inspired and slightly afraid. The Galactic Council's collapse was total and complete. Their communication networks were reduced to broken signals, their military capabilities destroyed at a molecular level. What had begun as an experiment on a single child had transformed into a full-scale reconstruction of interstellar power dynamics. Quantum communication channels broadcast humanity's new terms of engagement. These weren't negotiation documents. They were absolute declarations. Every alien civilization watched as humans systematically restructured the existing galactic political framework. The terms were brutally simple. No species would ever again consider humans as experimental subjects. Scientific research would be subject to strict interstellar ethical protocols. Transparent communication would be mandatory. Those who violated these terms would face immediate and total technological isolation. Alien diplomatic representatives who attempted to negotiate were met with a cold, calculated response. Humanity demonstrated technological capabilities so advanced that previous understanding of interstellar technology became completely obsolete. Research facilities across multiple star systems began analyzing the human response. What they discovered terrified them. The technologies deployed weren't just advanced, they represented a quantum leap in scientific understanding that made previous galactic technologies look primitive. Yunji's quantum recording devices, which had initially documented her torture, became the foundation of a new interstellar communication and monitoring system. Every moment of psychological manipulation was now a weapon of diplomatic enforcement. The psychological impact was equally significant. Alien civilizations that had viewed humans as a young, naive species now recognized them as a strategic force, capable of total systematic destruction. The balance of power had shifted permanently. Military strategists discovered that humanity's response wasn't just about revenge. It was a complete reimagining of interstellar engagement. Diplomatic protocols were rewritten, technological exchange systems were redesigned, and ethical standards were reconstructed from the ground up. Quantum communication networks began transmitting a clear message. Humanity was no longer asking for a place at the galactic table. They were redesigning the entire dining room. The transformation wasn't just external. Human society itself had changed. The unified response had created a global culture more integrated and powerful than ever before. National boundaries became irrelevant in the face of this new global identity. Scientific communities that had been competitive now worked with unprecedented collaboration. Technologies that had been hidden were now shared, creating a global technological ecosystem that advanced at an exponential rate. Alien civilizations watched in a mixture of terror and fascination. The species they had considered weak and experimentally disposable had transformed into the most significant strategic force in known galactic history. Yunji Park became more than a person. She was a symbol of human resilience, a living representation of a species that could transform psychological trauma into a fundamental restructuring of interstellar relationships. The quantum weapons that had been deployed weren't just tools of destruction. They were statements. Each strike carried a message about humanity's technological capabilities and moral boundaries. Diplomatic channels that had previously been controlled by the Galactic Council were now managed through a new human-designed system. Transparency, ethical consideration, and mutual respect became the foundational principles. The reckoning wasn't just about punishment. It was about creating a new framework of interstellar engagement. Humanity had not just defeated the Galactic Council. They had reimagined how intelligent species could interact. As the final communications were transmitted, something became clear. The experiment conducted on a single child had awakened a force far more powerful than any alien civilization could have ever imagined.